Okay, we will now restart proceedings and we will now proceed with the division on Amendment 1, and members should cast their votes now. The vote is now closed. Point of order, Colette Stevenson.
I had a problem with my connection. I would have voted no.
Thank you, Ms Stevenson. Your vote will be recorded. The result of the vote on amendment number 1 in the name of Stephen Kerr is yes 22, no 87. There were no abstentions. The amendment is therefore not agreed. We now turn to Group 2 on enforcement powers. I call Amendment 2 in the name of Stephen Kerr, grouped with Amendment 3, and I call on Stephen Kerr to move Amendment 2 and to speak to both amendments in the group. Mr Kerr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Disappointed with that vote, obviously. I felt it was a very reasonable amendment. Nevertheless, I will address the second and third amendments which appear in this Group 2. Again, the intent is not about weakening enforcement. Far from that. I think you'd be surprised if I was advocating for a weakening of enforcement. What I'm trying to do in these amendments is simply make enforcement defensible, proportionate and consistent with well-established principles that this Parliament has applied repeatedly in other regulatory regimes. At stage 2, the Minister emphasised the need for effective enforcement powers to meet UEFA's requirements and to ensure the integrity of the event. Now, I am a realist, and I think the Minister and other members of the committee, and perhaps a few others, know what my reservations are about effectively a list of demands from UEFA forming the basis of our bill in order for us to be able to host the event. But I am a realist, and I understand that that is the nature of the organisation. That's how they operate, and that's how they get their own way. And it basically creates an exclusion zone of sorts around the playing venues, which are intended to sanitise those areas from any other commercial activities. It's fundamentally, and I suppose I'm appealing to the more left-wing members of the Chamber when I say this, if I can. I'm not sure I'm capable of appealing to people on the left in any respect. But you are effectively giving an international business a monopoly, a geographic monopoly within Scotland. That is what we're doing. Now, I understand that that's the price that I think, understand we have to pay. But I think there are other aspects of how this is achieved that we do have some nuance in respect to how it's done. And that's why these amendments 2 and 3 matter. Because fulfilling UEFA's requirements for this cordon sanitaire commercial free zone where they get to do what they like around Hampden, I understand that's integral to getting the event. But there's nothing in these amendments that cuts across any of that. What these amendments do is ensure that the exercise of those powers is clear, is bounded, and is capable of withstanding scrutiny. And I think it's in the best traditions of Scots law and this Parliament that those principles are debated here again at stage 3, because they are simple safeguards. Amendment 2 is about concerns about entry and search powers. As I say, simple safeguards for occupiers when an enforcement officer enters premises. The ability to ask why entry is taking place, the ability to observe a search where appropriate, and a clear route to report an entry that is believed to be unlawful. I felt again in the Minister's letter to the committee, which maybe others have seen, I felt he actually made a case for this amendment himself. Now, maybe he interprets his own words differently than I do. Now, of course, that's entirely feasible. In terms of this is the quote from the Minister's letter, in terms of the part of the amendment that relates to reporting unlawful entry, while Glasgow City Council have a complaints procedure that could be used, if an individual believes that enforcement officers are acting out with the law, there is uncertainty about whether the appropriate course of action would be to raise this with Glasgow City Council or with Police Scotland. This creates confusion for the occupier and for the enforcement bodies. But my amendment is very clear, because it says that report, if there's a sense of injustice or unfairness or inequity in the way that the enforcement order, or perhaps no enforcement order, more to the point, was executed, it does say that if in 2C, Amendment 2 in C, where they consider the entry to be unlawful, report the entry to Glasgow City Council. So I felt justified the Amendment 2 that I've put down, because I would say that none of this is novel. None of it is obstructive. Those safeguards already exist in substance and in other enforcement contexts, including consumer protection and trading standards. What they do is reflect basic administrative fairness and good practice. Putting them on the face of the bill, I think, is a very judiciously wise thing to do. At stage 2, the Minister resisted similar arguments on the basis that enforcement officers must be able to act swiftly and decisively. I agree, but swift action and basic transparency are not necessarily to be seen as in conflict. I know the Minister thinks they're in conflict, but I don't think that they're in conflict, and that would not normally be the way that we would see these things. An explanation of why an officer is exercising a power does not delay enforcement. Allowing observation, where appropriate, does not compromise an investigation. Providing a reporting route does not second-guess the officers on the ground in the operation. It protects them, as much as it protects the occupier by ensuring confidence in the legality of the process. In practice, these safeguards reduce the risk of disputes escalating, reduce the risk of retrospective challenge, and increase public confidence in enforcement activity during what will be, globally, a highly visible event. And I think that is in everyone's interest, and I think that's in our country's interest in terms of our, quite rightly, we jealously guard our international reputation as a country, and I think this is a pillar of sorts to support that reputation that we all prize. Now, Amendment 3 is even narrower. It concerns the circumstances in which reasonable force may be used, and as drafted, the bill permits force where an officer considers it necessary, and my amendment simply tightens that test to cases involving an immediate risk to public safety. That language is familiar. It's well understood by the enforcement bodies and the courts. It reflects the seriousness of authorising force without removing the power where it is genuinely needed. So again, I'm not seeking to subvert the intent of the legislation, simply to underpin it with the safeguards that I think are traditionally those that we would expect within the jurisdiction of Scots law. And at stage 2, I know the Minister argued that the existing wording provided flexibility. The difficulty is that flexibility cuts both ways. A broad, undefined threshold invites inconsistent interpretation and increases legal risk. A clear public safety test gives officers certainty, protects against overreach and reassures the public that force is a last resort, not a matter of convenience. I will conclude by simply saying it's always worthwhile remembering the context. These powers will be exercised in busy public spaces involving traders, residents, visitors who are not criminals in any ordinary sense of the word criminal. Most will be law-abiding people caught up in a temporary regulatory regime, because that is the nature of the bill. And in that environment, clarity especially matters. So taken together, Presiding Officer, these amendments do not blunt enforcement, they sharpen it, they align this bill with established practice elsewhere in Scots law, reduce the risk of challenge and strengthen the legitimacy of enforcement during the period that it can be applied. And I would encourage the Minister to view them in that light. They're reasonable, proportionate and practical, and accepting them would improve the bill without compromising its purpose or its operation, and I urge him to do so.
Okay. Minister.
Deputy Presiding Officer, in developing this bill, we have sought to take a proportionate approach to meeting the hosting requirements for Euro 2028. The bill, as currently drafted, already contains a number of safeguards on the use of enforcement powers. These are based on previous experience from major events and were developed by government officials with input from Police Scotland and Glasgow City Council. That engagement sought to ensure that the measures of the bill are workable. And as I set out at stage 2 in the proceedings there, I wanted to consider views from Glasgow City Council before making a final decision on what is now Amendment 2, and we're discussing it at the moment. Having received those views, I updated the committee on the 13th of January. They made it clear why we should not support Amendment 2. Glasgow City Council kindly provided real-life situations where the requirements as set out in paragraphs A and B could be exploited in order to frustrate enforcement action. For example, engaging an enforcement officer in conversation can be used to create time for evidence to be disposed of elsewhere on the premises, and allowing such distractions in law would effectively negate the impact of any enforcement action. So I don't therefore consider it appropriate to place this kind of provision on the face of the bill. In terms of Amendment 3, relating to when reasonable force can be used to enter a premises, I could not support this when a similar amendment was laid by Jamie Halcrow-Johnson at stage 2, and I can't support it now. As I said at stage 2, enforcement officers must be able to take swift action to tackle offences under the bill. The bill allows a police constable or an enforcement officer, when authorised by a police constable, to use reasonable force in situations where the police constable reasonably believes that there is a real and substantive risk that delay in seeking a warrant would defeat or prejudice the purpose of taking action in the first place. If this power can only be used in situations where there is an immediate risk to public safety, it would then severely restrict the ability of enforcement officers to take action. That action might include to secure evidence before it could be destroyed, or investigate crimes, or take swift action against ambush marketing. And that, of course, could undermine the core purpose of this bill. I therefore think that Amendment 3 would make enforcement action under Section 24 of the bill unworkable, and there is a risk that this would undermine public confidence in the safety of the event. However, I was keen to better understand the position of Police Scotland and Glasgow City Council on the impact of the amendment, so government officials undertook further engagement with both of these key partners. To help provide further reassurance to members on enforcement, I have written to Glasgow City Council on the 8th of December seeking further information on how trading standards officers carry out enforcement in practice more generally and the guidance they follow in doing so. And I, of course, will share that response with Parliament and the committee. I therefore would ask Stephen Kerr not to press Amendment 2 or 3, and of course again, should he do so, I encourage members to resist both amendments.
Thank you. Calling Stephen Kerr to wind up, press to withdraw Amendment 2. Mr Kerr.
Well, I accept, of course, what the Minister has said and the advice that he is acting on. I do think that we should be aware, eyes wide open, that this is a bill that protects the commercial rights of an international business. And when we are talking about enforced entries, we're talking about merchandise that has not been sanctioned by UEFA. We're talking about unlawful advertising, in the sense that someone has a banner or something on a premise within this exclusion area around Hampden, which means that people would be liable to get a knock at the door. And what the intention of these amendments has been to support the actions that are necessary in order for UEFA to stage part of the tournament in Scotland, but at the same time maintain our long and proud traditions in this country when it comes to entry, forced entry without a warrant. And that has been my motivation in persisting with these amendments. But I accept what the Minister has said, and on the basis of what I think is the goodwill that exists between us on this bill, I will not be pressing either of these amendments.
Thank you, Mr Kerr. Mr Kerr seeks to withdraw Amendment 2. Does any member object? No member objects. Amendment 2 is therefore withdrawn. Call Amendment 3 in the name of Stephen Kerr. Already debated with Amendment 2. Stephen Kerr, to press or withdraw?
Amendment 3?
Amendment 3.
Not moved.
Not moved. Okay, thank you. With that concludes Stage 3 proceedings on the bill. At this stage, as members will be aware, the Presiding Officer is required under standing orders to decide whether or not, in her view, any provision of the bill relates to a protected subject matter, that is, whether it modifies the electoral system and franchise for Scottish parliamentary elections. In the case of this bill, in the view of the Presiding Officer, no provision of the UEFA European Championship Scotland Bill relates to a protected subject matter. Therefore, the bill does not require a supermajority to be passed at Stage 3. As we move to the next item of business, I encourage members who are leaving the chamber to do so as quickly but also as quietly as they can. We move on to motion 20390 in the name of Richard Lockhead on the UEFA European Championship Scotland Bill at Stage 3. I'd invite members wishing to participate in the debate to press the request to speak buttons now or as soon as possible. And I call on Richard Lockhead to speak to and move the motion. Minister, around 7 minutes.
Well, clearly it's a pleasure to address the Chamber this afternoon at this key milestone for the UEFA European Championship Scotland Bill. As football, I'm sure, is more on our minds than for a long time, it's great to be debating a major event again today. This bill is a vital step in enabling Scotland to play its part in hosting Euro 2028. I'd like to thank MSPs for their constructive engagement in getting the bill to this point. In particular, I want to thank the Constitution, Europe, External Affairs and Cultural Committee for their scrutiny and of careful consideration, and also thank our stakeholders, including UEFA, the Scottish Football Association, Police Scotland, Glasgow City Council, all of whom provided evidence to help inform discussion on the bill. Now, Scotland is the perfect stage to host 3 of the world's top sporting events over the next 3 years. The Commonwealth Games, of course, in 2026, the Tour de France Grand Départ in 2027 and Euro 2028, bringing economic, social and cultural benefits to people and businesses right across the country. The passion and dedication shown by players and supporters alike, I'm sure, will make Euro 2028 really special. Through hosting, Glasgow and Scotland will be able to showcase our nation as a welcoming, diverse and energetic country to a global audience. The Championships are predicted to generate socio-economic benefits of around £270 million in our country. It will provide opportunities for a number of sectors, boosting tourism as well, and of course supporting our country's culture. Glasgow will host at least one official UEFA fan zone, extending the experience beyond Hampden Park. The tournament offers a significant opportunity for Scotland to generate social and economic benefits. It promotes our nation as an ideal place to visit, study, work and invest. So we look forward to welcoming Europe in 2028 and to showcasing Scotland as that outward-looking and progressive country that we are. Hosting international events often involves meeting certain requirements of the commercial rights holders. So this bill seeks to meet specific requirements set by UEFA as the rights holder to put in place commercial rights protection measures. And as we have partly addressed through the debate at Stage 3, the bill does this by prohibiting unauthorised sale of championship tickets above face value or for profit. This supports fair access to tickets so that as many fans as possible can enjoy the matches. None of us want to see match tickets being sold at inflated prices. So the bill will help deter that and to ensure that action can be taken if it happens. And the bill restricts unauthorised street trading and advertising within designated event zones. In doing so, we want to make things as easy as possible for those affected by event zones, and that's why the bill makes sure there will be guidance in place. It's also why the bill makes sure that street traders who cannot trade where they normally would will be offered alternative arrangements. And lastly, the bill provides enforcement powers to implement these protections effectively. So these measures are consistent with legislation that the Scottish Parliament passed for Scotland to host Euro 2020 matches. They are time-limited, proportionate and targeted, and they will be automatically repealed on the 31st of December 2028. In addition to these key areas, amendments passed at Stage 2 responded to points made by the Lead Committee. They ensure that the civic right to protest is specially protected. They also place a duty on Scottish ministers to review the operation and effectiveness of the bill. A report on the findings of the review will be laid before Parliament by the end of 2030. That will ensure appropriate consideration of the bill's impacts is provided to Parliament. And as should the bill pass today, we will continue to work with delivery partners to implement the provisions to deliver a successful Euro 2028. Glasgow City Council will issue guidance on trading and advertising measures and offer alternative arrangements for street traders affected by the restrictions. We will continue to work with partners to ensure guidance is accessible and that businesses have the right information to help them plan for the tournament as well. Glasgow Life are developing their host city concept, including plans for fan zone and activation sites for submission to UEFA later this year. So we will work closely with partners to develop regulations relating to event zones where trading and advertising restrictions will apply. We will continue to engage with businesses and communities as part of that. And we will continue to look for opportunities to raise awareness about the bill's provisions and the restrictions that will be in place. We are working closely with the UK Government and other host nation governments to ensure that our respective legislative approaches are joined up and effective. So, Euro 2028 is a really significant opportunity for Scotland, as I said before, economically, culturally and in terms of our reputation as well. We hope to see some really exciting and iconic moments here in Scotland at our famous Hampden Park Stadium. Hopefully many of those iconic moments through the whole of the tournament, of course, will involve our national team. But passing this bill means that we can make that opportunity a reality. And I know that members across the Chamber recognise the significant benefits of hosting Euro 2028 and all the excitement that will bring. And the legacy, of course, it can also deliver as well. And together we can ensure the successful delivery of the biggest sporting event ever jointly hosted across the UK and Ireland. So it gives me pleasure to urge members across the Chamber to move this bill and ask them to support it at decision time. So I formally move that the Parliament agrees that the UEFA European Championship Scotland Bill is passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I now call Stephen Kerr. Around 6 minutes, please.
Presiding Officer, we have reached the Stage 3 debate of the UEFA European Championship Scotland Bill, and it's right to recognise that there has been a lot of work done on this very short bill. There's been serious scrutiny at stages 1, 2 and 3. It's been detailed. I think it's acknowledged that it's all been constructive, and the Minister indeed has engaged in that process in good faith. And that, of course, is the way to make good law in a Parliament. And therefore, as you would expect, the Conservatives will certainly not be opposing the bill at this stage. We will be supporting its passage. But before I turn to the wider significance of Euro 2028, I want to place something clearly on the parliamentary record, with your indulgence, Presiding Officer. At Stage 3, Amendment 4 in my name, which sought to extend the charity auction exemption to community-controlled bodies, community councils and schools, was not debated, and that was the result of my error in the submission process. And I take, of course, full responsibility for that mistake, and the Presiding Officer's decision not to admit the amendment as a manuscript amendment was taken in accordance with the rules of the Parliament, and of course I respect that decision entirely. Nevertheless, I am bound to say, and wish to put it on the official record, I regret very much that Parliament did not have the opportunity to consider again the substance of that amendment, because the purpose of that amendment was straightforward and practical. We all know across Scotland, in our constituencies, in our regions, community groups, parent councils, school-connected organisations, all kinds of local good causes have for many years use donated tickets to major sporting events as raffle prizes or auction items to raise funds. That's not sharp practice, and it's not exploitation. It's a long-standing and widely understood feature of community life in Scotland. My concern remains that, notwithstanding the bill's intentions, there's a risk that such groups could unwittingly find themselves on the wrong side of the law if they continue what has been common practice for decades. These are not commercial touts. They are volunteers, parents, local organisers raising money for school trips, for uniforms, community facilities, football strips, you name it, and charitable causes. So having said that, I turn to Euro 2028 itself, and there can be no doubt, and I agree with the Minister on this, in terms of its importance as a global sporting event, but also, of course, for Scotland. It's going to be watched by hundreds of millions. Perhaps I'm underestimating the numbers there. And Scotland does have the privilege of hosting part of it. And the Minister is right, although there's still a bit of work to be done to qualify. Well, let's be optimistic that there will be a Scotland team in that tournament, hopefully playing in our national stadium. But being the host of such an event does bring obligations, and I've elucidated on my concerns about the nature of the way that UEFA, indeed other global organisations, do their business. But setting that aside, it is an opportunity to present Scotland in the best possible light. We are undoubtedly a welcoming country. We take pride in that reputation. We are a capable host and a nation that is confident in itself, and rightly so. And it's also an opportunity that unites this chamber, and any opportunity for us to act the united way is to be embraced. There is a shared hope that Scotland's men's team will qualify, as I said a moment ago, that Scottish players will take the field, and we will have our home team to cheer on. Football matters in Scotland. There was an excellent debate last night brought to the chamber by George Adam, who provided us with his customary entertaining but also passionate exhortation for football and for the importance of football to communities and to our country as a whole. But it's such an important part of our history, our culture, our shared identity. We invented the modern game. I used to be proud, whenever I could, when I was the MP for Stirling, to mention that we had the world's oldest football in the Smith Stirling Museum. Football is part of our national DNA. And, I mean, I mentioned we invented the modern game. I think that there is no doubt that the Scottish interpretation of football is what now shapes the world's thinking about football. We are the country of Bill Shankly, of Jock Stein, of Walter Smith, of Matt Busby. And if you'll forgive all those generational references, because they are in the context of my generation, but also the country of great figures like Billy McNeill and John Gregg, towering figures who have shaped generations of players and supporters. We celebrate Jimmy Johnson, Davy Cooper, players who entertained, who embodied imagination and the joy of football. We remember Jim Baxter casually playing keepy up at Wembley in 1967. If we all weren't alive then, we've seen the video. I give way.
Bob Doris.
Stephen Kerr for giving way as he's gone through all those illustrious names. Can I just put on the record the name of Bobby Dinny, who was a legendary community coach in North Glasgow, Partick Thistle, but also other clubs. And it's not just those who perform the beautiful game so beautifully, but those coaches and volunteers who bring the young people through into our beautiful game. Bobby Dinny sadly passed away a few months ago.
Stephen Kerr.
For that intervention. My colleague, Brian Whittle, would be he was saying a particularly loud here to the comments about coaches. And this particular football season in our most senior level of the game has highlighted the importance of coaching and leadership, like no other perhaps. But let me just continue to conclude my reminiscence about Jim Baxter on that fateful day for the English at Wembley when we dethroned the world champions. And it may have just been in our imaginations we did that in terms of winning that particular game, but it meant a great deal to Scots. It meant a great deal, for example, to my father, who would have very little prompting or excuse to want to discuss that. And that's what football means. Its importance is not, though, just confined to the past. It continues to do real good, as was highlighted last night It encourages physical activity at a time when inactivity is a growing concern. It brings people together across age, background and community. It now does so in so many forms. We heard last night about walking football from the Minister, indeed, veterans football, women's football, which is a fantastic success, and grassroots football in all its diversity. So to conclude, Euro 2028 is an incredible opportunity for us to build on the legacy of the past and create a new legacy around this tournament. And it won't be in terms of infrastructure or international profile alone. It will be engaging more of our people to play, to be active, to run about a bit. And Brian Whittle, I'm sure, will talk a lot about this in his speech. But I am under no illusion about the nature of UEFA as an organisation, and I think I've made that clear in this debate. Just a few weeks ago, in conclusion, at Hampden, we saw how 90 minutes of football can become something far more than a football match, a series of moments that people will talk about for decades. And my hope is that Euro 2028 creates many more such moments for our country, for our communities, and for the rising generation of Scottish footballers yet to come.
Thank you. I now call on Neil Bibby. Around 5 minutes, please.
Glad Mr Kerr mentioned the importance of the women's football at the end of his contribution there, because in addition to all the illustrious names that he and Mr Doris mentioned in terms of contribution to football, I'm sure we would all welcome the contribution of Rose Riley, Julie Fleeting, Erin Cuthbert, Caroline Weir, Rachel Corsey, and so many who have contributed to the women's game as well. I'm pleased to open this stage-free debate on the UEFA European Championship Scotland Bill this afternoon on behalf of Scottish Labour and to speak in support of the bill. And can I also take the opportunity to thank the Minister and his team for his engagement on the bill over the last few months, and acknowledge also the work of the Constitutional, External Affairs and Culture Committee members and clerks on the bill too. Scottish Labour has consistently supported the UK and Ireland hosting Euro 2028. That's why we work constructively with the Minister and his team throughout the passage of the bill in this Parliament. And that's why Scottish Labour will be supporting this bill at stage 3. I know Mr Kerr put forward a number of amendments today, and I want to acknowledge these. Although these did not pass, I do believe they received important commitments and reassurances in response. As I said before, at the Stage 1 debate, I know many of us will be looking forward to welcoming this major event to Scotland in 2028. For the younger generation, this will be the first opportunity to experience the Euros here in Scotland. And we must also remember the last time Hampden Park hosted the European Championships, COVID restrictions were in place in 2021, so many fans were not able to be in the stadium to watch the matches. For football fans across Europe, as has been mentioned, it will bring the opportunity for people to visit Scotland, perhaps for the first time. It will give fans an opportunity to explore our culture, our heritage and our rich history, and provide a fantastic platform to promote Brand Scotland. I mentioned at Stage 1, and so did the Minister as well, today, the economic benefits to Scotland this will bring, and they will be significant and will provide a much-needed boost to the Scottish economy. The UK Department for Culture, Media and Sport estimates the tournament will contribute £2.4 billion in socio-economic value to the host nations, and I'm pleased that Scotland will enjoy a slice of this pie. Presiding Officer, it's important that we use our budgets to invest in sports and invest in people. That's why I'm pleased that the UK Labour Government recognised the importance of sport by pledging £900 million in funding as part of its government's plan for change. While I welcome the increase in the sports budget announced by the Scottish Government earlier this week, it does not go far enough and does not deliver on the SNP's promise to double the sports budget in this Parliament. I believe that is regrettable. Presiding Officer, Scottish Labour has always supported the Euros being held in the UK and Ireland in 2028 because we want to see more major international sporting events come to Scotland. These events will help our economy, raise our international profile and give people living in Scotland the opportunity to witness world-class sporting events on their doorstep. It's for these reasons that we encourage the Scottish and UK governments to work together to bring the Commonwealth Games to Glasgow in 2026, an event that is now just a matter of months away. And that's why we also fully support the UK Labour Government, working with football associations and the devolved administrations to bring the Women's FIFA World Cup to the UK in 2035. These events contribute immense value to our society, well-being and economy. They also demonstrate the benefits of the Scottish Government working with the UK Government to bring these major events to Scotland. While 2028 may feel like a long time from now, many football fans will be looking forward with envy at those who have managed to secure a ticket for the World Cup this summer. Since Scotland qualified for the World Cup last year, the cost of tickets has been part of a wider debate about the affordability of tickets. We must prevent ordinary fans being priced out of the game. And that's part of the reason for hosting these events, is to ensure Scottish fans can access them without the additional costs of flights and accommodation to go elsewhere. And that's why I believe we should be looking to host more sporting events here. Scottish Labour will support the bill at stage 3, as it has previous stages, because this bill isn't just about meeting our obligations to UEFA. It's a wider goal we should have of being ready to host major sporting events right here in Scotland. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Mr Bibby. I now call Patrick Harvey. Around 4 minutes. Mr Harvey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I join others in thanking the Minister for advanced engagement on the bill, as well as the clerks and witnesses that supported the work of the SEAC Committee. Now, my fellow members of the SEAC Committee are probably fairly familiar with the slightly glazed expression that comes over my face when the pre-meeting football banter begins just before 8:30 every Thursday morning. So I'm sure they understand precisely the level of enthusiasm that I bring into this afternoon's debate. But the bill itself is a largely technical set of measures in relation to the regulation of ticket sales, ticket touting and street trading during the event. And on most of that technical content, I think there's a fairly reasonable degree of consensus across the chamber. And I was also pleased that the bill, as introduced, incorporated in advance some of the amendments that my colleague Ross Greer moved in the previous UEFA bill back in 2020. Those amendments sought to achieve more clarity around the use of enforcement powers, how they are used, and the concerns over trading breaches in championship trading zones. And I'm pleased that the Government incorporated those amendments into this new bill in advance. So I don't have great concerns at the moment over how those enforcement powers are framed in the bill, but it will be important that MSPs and others are vigilant over how they're actually used in practice. And so also included in the bill is a requirement for the Government to report on the operation and effectiveness of the games, of the Act after the games have taken place. The bill sets out protections for large corporate sponsors, and it's been acknowledged that that's a requirement of UEFA holding their event here. But it is hugely important that civil liberties are protected rather than just corporate interests, and that any restrictions are targeted at commercial activity, not at legitimate protest by citizens. I'm pleased also that enforcement, and I recognise that the Minister in answering that challenge agreed with that principle, and that's on the record, and I hope that we'll pay attention to that as the events unfold. I'm pleased that council enforcement officers will only be able to enter residences by permission or with the warrant granted by a sheriff. Now, the last European Championship was, of course, held in very different circumstances, and the aspects of the bill that I've mentioned should allow us, I think, to effectively monitor the human rights impact of the legislation and the balance of enforcing powers between the police and council officers. As I think Neil Bibby was alluding to, football shouldn't be seen to belong to corporate sponsors and to big business interests. It should belong to its fans. And beyond the civil rights protections, there's the issue of affordability. There are still concerns about the affordability of tickets and the proportion of tickets being allocated for corporate sponsors due to their commercial interests. But the bill's restrictions around ticket touting are, of course, legitimate. We've already seen World Cup tickets being resold at hundreds or even thousands of times their initial sale prices. Football isn't going to be a game for everyone if we allow a market based on price gouging in the extreme. So there is action on this. Perhaps we can go further. And I think in recognising I'm coming up to the end of my opening speech, in my closing speech, I'll address some of the wider issues that we can address in relation to the affordability of these events outside of the formal context of the bill.
Thank you, Mr Harvey. We move to the open debate. I call first George Adam, to follow by Alec Rowley. To 4 minutes, Mr Adam.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Presiding Officer, I feel as if I'm talking about football all the time in this chamber, but for me that's no bad thing. It's an important part of our society, it's an important part of Scotland. I think Mr Kerr mentioning the debate we had last night about what our football clubs bring back to our communities is an important point to mention as well. But football does define us, Presiding Officer, in Scotland, the good days and the bad days. It's what we're all about. And even the modern passing game I mentioned last night during the debate was created by Glasgow's Queen's Park, because in the original Scotland-England games away back in 1872, I think it was a draw. And then for the next 9 years, because we had this passing game as opposed to the kind of more rugby-orientated English game, we won 9 of these games. If only things could be like that now at the tournaments we're in. But football does give us that moment, that Kenny McLean from the halfway line moment. But incidentally, in that Denmark game, we had Kenny McLean, John McGuinn, Lawrence Shanklin, all came through the ranks of St Mirren Paisley, along with manager Steve Clark. So, as I always say, all roads do lead to Paisley. But this bill itself is about ensuring what we have what we need for Scotland to co-host a major championship. It's about Scotland stepping up and doing the job properly and delivering a major international event in a way that only Scotland can and works for our communities, our fans and our country. Euro 2028 is a massive opportunity for Scotland, both on the field and off the field. And who knows with this current crop of the Scotland national team. And this hosting will not just be a major event for just Glasgow. I think this was said by the Minister as well. Not just at Hampden, it's for the whole nation. I've said this before, this is an opportunity for us to showcase Scotland on an international stage. It's for the Tartan Army, the media darlings and best ambassadors that our nation has, to do their thing and be friendly, enjoy themselves and make the tournament one to remember. Notice I've already got us qualified at this stage. We know how to do this, and we have the experience with other major events. We've got this, Presiding Officer. Scotland's a proud track record of delivering major sporting events, from the Commonwealth Games to Euro 2020 to world-class cultural events that welcome people from every corner of the globe. The bill is about making sure we meet our obligation as a host nation while doing it in a way that is proportionate, time-limited and fair. One of the core purposes of the bill, as we've already mentioned, is tackling ticket touting. And let's be honest, touts don't add any value to football. They don't help fans, they don't help our communities, and they help themselves. This legislation makes it clear that tickets should go to fans at face value, not to be hoarded and sold in profit. It's about protecting ordinary supporters, the people who save up, who plan ahead and just want to see their team play. This bill also deals with unauthorised trading and advertising around event zones. This is not unique to major football tournaments, it's the same as any other major events. The Olympics, the Commonwealth Games, Rugby World Cups and even Eurovision is the same. Again, this isn't about shutting people out, it's about ensuring fairness and safety and protecting the integrity of the tournament. And I welcome the fact that Glasgow City Council will be required to provide guidance and offer alternative arrangements for those affected street traders, because where would we be without the hats, scarves and flags shout as you go to a game? But this matters because it's all part of our game. Because we want a festival atmosphere, not a heavy-handed one. Importantly, amendments agreed at Stage 2 strengthened protections for civil rights, including the right to peaceful protest. Across Scotland, football is part of who we are. It brings people together across generations, whether it's kids kicking a ball in the park or families gathering to watch a big game. Euro 2028 gives us a chance to showcase Scotland as a modern, confident, welcoming nation and a place that can host world-class events while staying true to our values.
Thank you, Mr Adam. I now call Alec Rowley again, up to 4 minutes. Mr Rowley.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. As Patrick Harvey said, this bill is largely technical and it's difficult to get too worked up in terms of the technicalities. But it was interesting when Stephen Kerr mentioned the constructive approach that has been taken in terms of this bill. And I only wish that our politics and our Parliament could actually take that approach more often. The great Scottish journalist Brian Taylor would say to me, well, it's politics. What do you expect? And while I massively respect Brian Taylor, it's an area I do disagree with him on, and so do I think the majority of the Scottish people. Because how many times when we've been out and about in our constituencies have people said, why can't you just come together and work together in the best interests of the people that you represent? And I do hope moving forward that all politicians can look at the rise of the right and ask themselves, why is that happening? And if it's partly because people say the rest of you are all the same and you continually squabble and argue and blame each other while things don't get better. So perhaps the approach in this bill might rub off as we move forward. I also heard Stephen Kerr talk about some of the great names of the past in Scottish football. And I'm one that absolutely believes that we have to look at history, we have to know our history and we have to learn from our history. But I'm also someone who likes to look forward and try and ensure that learning from our history we can move forward. So how do we support football in Scotland moving forward? And for me, we have to start to hopefully the legacy, or one of the legacies that can come from the Euros. There will be excitement this year with the World Cup and the fact that we've qualified, but then on to the Euros. Hopefully a legacy can be that we start to look at how we embed football and support football at a community level. Neil Bibby talked about the increasing funding coming from the UK government for sport and from the Scottish government for sport. I actually think that we need to look at how we empower communities more. You know, when I grew up, people played football in the streets. There wasn't loads of cars in the streets like there is now. Society's changed for the days when I grew up. But what I see visible in communities right across Scotland is a strong community football that is growing. And that depends a lot on volunteers, whether that's the parents, the grandparents, all giving up their time to run local football clubs. And then it absolutely depends on the sports coaches that are there, that are able to support. I would like to see us, not this Parliament believing that it can fix everything or it's just about money, but by working together with local government, and looking at how we come up with a Scotland-wide strategy that empowers communities, that says our greatest resources actually in these communities. The football coaches, you have smaller football teams that are struggling right now, that have professional players and coaches that could do more with our schools. When I think back to 50-odd years ago at primary school, you know, the local teachers would take us up the park and we would get to kick about a ball and play a bit of football. That all stopped in, I think, the 80s, the 90s, when we had the industrial action and teachers' workloads continued to rise. But there's a whole resource out there in communities up and down Scotland, and if it could be pulled together by politicians willing to work together with local government, then the real legacy could be that we have a football team that's in there in every major competition, and that young people have the opportunity to access football and become the greats of the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Riley. We move to closing speeches. I call first Patrick Harvey. Around 4 minutes, please. Mr Harvey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. That was quick. Can I just acknowledge some of the comments that we've had? I think we got one reference to flags, hats and scarves again from George Adam. I think we heard that in the committee pretty much every week that we had the debates on the bill. So it would have been wrong for today's debate to pass without that. And at one point, George Adam also mentioned Eurovision. I thought for a moment the debate was going to come back into my field of reference, but sadly the moment passed all too quickly. But there was also from Mr Adam and a couple of other members some acknowledgement of the issues around civil liberties and human rights, and in particular the right to protest. I do want to reinforce that, because while I accept, and we all accept, that some restrictions on commercial activity is going to be a requirement of UEFA in hosting this. None of us should want to restrict the right of people to protest, including by using, subverting or satirising the corporate logos of corporate interests that they want to protest against. And I think we're going to need to make sure that we pay attention to how that rolls out in practice. Presiding Officer, I hope you're going to give me a little bit of flexibility at this point, because I'd like to make some comments about matters that are not formally included in the text of the bill, but are still relevant to the event that the bill is about, and to the issues about affordability that several members have talked about. Because there is more that we can do, the Scottish Government, local government, the organisers and others, to address issues of affordability. For example, at the last European Championship held in 2024, hosted by Germany, with every ticket, fans were offered a free fan pass. Now, that included 36-hour travel pass for regional public transport in host cities, valid from 6 a.m. on match day to 6 p.m. the following day. It covered local buses, trams, regional trains to encourage sustainable transport and to reduce the costs that supporters would face. And that was delivered in partnership with the football associations who allocated tickets. Now, for Glasgow and the surrounding areas, something like this would enable fans to get in and out of heavily congested fan zones and Hampden as efficiently as possible. My colleagues in the Glasgow branch of the Scottish Greens are currently campaigning for something like this in relation to large events at Hampden on an ongoing basis, but it could certainly be done in relation to the Euros if the political will was there. It's not within the bill, and I don't think it would have been appropriate to try and crowbar it into the bill as a legislative requirement, but it's action that we can take ahead of the championship. And it also means that we need to make sure that we have a public transport system that's capable of serving the Greater Glasgow region, in particular when large events like a championship are taking place. The successful Green argument for the government to commit money for bus franchising also has the potential to ensure that the city and region are ready for large events like this, and the public transport role that needs to be played to cut down on congestion and emissions. But we're going to have to go further and reduce the bureaucratic effort that's involved in putting bus franchising into place. And there are arguments to speed up the process so that those measures can be put in place, if at all possible, in time for the Euros. Presiding Officer, football, so I am told, does indeed have the power to bring communities together. But to achieve that potential, it must genuinely be available and affordable to everybody. If corporate interests want to run cultural and sports events, to turn them into mere commodities, we have a responsibility to take back that power and make sure that they're run for everybody.
Thank you, Mr Harvey. And I call Neil Bibby again, around 4 minutes. Mr Bibby.
Thank you, President Officer. I'm pleased to close this debate on behalf of Scottish Labour this afternoon. I would start by concurring with Mr Harvey on the importance of public transport in relation to getting people to and from major sporting events. I do think we need to look at that in the context of Euro 2028. I think more pressing, actually, we do need a proper transport plan in place for the Commonwealth Games in 2026, which is only a matter of months away. We need to see progress in that. I hope the Minister will take that forward with ministerial colleagues. Clearly different events, but lessons could be learned from that going forward. As I said previously, and as many across the Chamber have said today, this tournament should bring excitement and positivity to the country. It will be an opportunity to bring people together from across Europe through their shared love of our national sport and to welcome people to Scotland. In Scotland, as we've heard, football is in our DNA, it's part of our culture. Every weekend, football fans across Scotland go through the gates to watch their local teams win, lose or draw. Fans keep turning up in their droves, and the popularity of football in Scotland speaks for itself. According to UEFA in 2024-25, Scotland recorded significantly higher top-flight attendance per capita than any other league in Europe. Supporters turned out over 5.3 million times to watch their teams across all SPFL competitions in that season, the highest figure in the SPFL era, and a rise of nearly 185,000 on the previous record. With such encouraging stats like these, Scotland is the obvious choice to host another major football tournament once again. And we should look to be building on success of hosting major sporting events, building on the success of Commonwealth Games in 2014, the European Championships 2020 and the upcoming Commonwealth Games this summer and then the European Championships in 2028. The opportunity to host major sporting events, as I said earlier, creates opportunities for the future, and there's no reason why Scotland cannot become a destination of choice for sporting fans around the world. We should be looking to host more events in the future, and while this legislation is necessary and specific to this tournament in 2028, we could, I would hope, serious consideration is given in future to taking a more strategic approach to introducing potentially a framework bill to ensure that we are ready to host future events to comply with governing bodies like UEFA in future. This will ensure we are ready and able to host, and we can free up valuable parliamentary time to focus our efforts on day-to-day business and preparing for such major events. Hosting here will not only benefit our economy, but will benefit people right across Scotland. I've previously spoken out, and as many members have this afternoon, about the importance of affordability and fans not being priced out the game. That is not right, and there should be no barriers to participation in spectating in our sport. However, there may not be a consensus about that, Presiding Officer. Not everyone has the bank balance of former Tory peer and Reform UK's new Scotland leader, Lord Malcolm Offord, who on Question Time seemed to suggest that it appeared reasonable for football fans to be charged £4,000 for a World Cup match day ticket. He has already boasted he is off to Miami for the World Cup, and I assume he may be taking his yacht with him. He lives in a different world to most hard-working Scots if he thinks £4,000 for a ticket to watch a football match is affordable, but I suppose for someone like him, a mortgage-free millionaire who lives in a mansion, it's just pocket change. But for most ordinary Scottish football fans, prices like this are simply not affordable. And at ticket price like these, Scotland manager Steve Clarke quite rightly said that football fans should not get themselves into debt just to go to the World Cup this year. But for those of us who will not be going to the World Cup, we should feel fortunate that most of us can hop on a bus or train to watch football here on our doorstep in 2028. And with Scotland competing in the World Cup this summer for the first time in 28 years, there is a feel-good factor right now in football. There's also an exciting title race at the top of the Scottish Premiership for the first time in a long time. I know that some in this chamber will be enjoying this title race a little more than others. On that note, Presiding Officer, I will conclude, and I'm happy to confirm our support from these benches for this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Bibby. I now call Brian Whittle, around 5 minutes. Mr Whittle.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer. I do rise with a feeling of déjà vu, having once again listened to George Adam talk about football and talk about St Mirren. And I'm then obliged to mention to Mr Adam once again, and for the second day running, of course, I used to coach his beloved St Mirren, and I know that gives him a bit of a dilemma. So it is a real pleasure to speak in a debate with such a positive message for Scotland and Scottish sport. We are, of course, Deputy Presiding Officer, again, quite expert in delivering international sporting events and delivering that legislation and policy for the major events in Scotland, having previously, as has been mentioned by many in the Chamber, hosted Euro 2020 Championships, the 2014 Commonwealth Games and the upcoming 2026 Commonwealth Games. Tour de France is coming, and we have hosted many World and European Championships across many sports. It just feels to me like let's go round again. And of course, I have to mention the Tartan Army, a very, very welcome travelling Tartan Army across all of Europe, across the whole of the world, have such a fantastic reputation. And I don't know if the world is ready to come here and be hosted by the Tartan Army. They ain't seen nothing yet. So I'd like to, at this point, add my thanks to the Minister and his team for the positive way in which he collaborated and communicated with MSPs and their teams. Were it always the case in this place, as Parliament, perhaps we might get much more done. I think in essence the main discussions have been around dealing with and defining ticket touting, charitable exemptions on selling tickets at auction. I know my colleague and friend Stephen Kerr wanted to speak much about that. Street trading in the vicinity of the venue and advertising bans, all of which I think in general were pretty much broad agreement across the Chamber, despite some of the amendments not making it onto the final bill. For me, the main issue that required more discussion and clarity was around the potential laws around designation of an enforcement officer and their powers, concerns around what would be acceptable in defining the use of reasonable force. There are additional powers being granted to enforcement officers, which have been the subject of discussion with those amendments brought forward. I think commercial rights of UEFA have been discussed significantly, and I know we have to consider them, but I think there is a level of unease highlighted by many in the chamber. For me, what I wanted to really talk about was we need to grasp the legacy coming from these major championships, and we haven't been good at that. I think 2014, 2014 Commonwealth Games, I was there every single day. I was in Glasgow, was ablaze with sunshine. I think the world thinks that Glasgow obviously must be quite close to the Caribbean, because it was in the 20s every day, except for the day that Usain Bolt ran, when there was a deluge, and it was such an amazing atmosphere. But post-games, we didn't do particularly well. I don't think that sport has moved on the way it should have done. We haven't grasped the opportunity the way we should have done. We haven't grasped the commercial opportunities either. And I think we have huge opportunities to do that. And I think back to 2014 when I was doing a little bit of work for one of the companies that were doing the IT integration, and I helped them develop their legacy programme. Legacy is not buying tickets for kids to go and watch. What we did was we did what was called a Club Together programme, where the sport, the club, the local authority and Sport Scotland clubbed together to buy 15 hours of professional help for that club. It cost £9,000, it was £3,000 each. And we were able to measure the outcome of that, and it was specifically in athletics. We were able to measure there was 3,000 more athletes brought into the sport, 300 more coaches and administrators brought into the sport. And I think that's the kind of legacy we need to do. We need to look at how we work with commercial partners and pull money together and opportunities together, because sport has got so expensive out there, especially if we talk about football, about renting and hiring pitches where we're pricing our kids out of it. So, to conclude, my ask of the government is this: out of these major championships, let's really consider what we mean by legacy, both in commercial and socially, and let's maximise that opportunity that bringing these major events to Scotland brings. Deputy Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Mr Whittle. Just for the record, you missed off your list the International Island Games hosted by Orkney last year, but with that we will move to the closing speech from the Minister. We wind up the debate for up to 6 minutes. Mr Minister.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I'm sure I noticed a picture on social media just recently of our Deputy Presiding Officer in a Scotland top, and I'm therefore disappointed he's not wearing it today for this debate, but maybe that would have not been appropriate. But I know he's a fan, and it's good to have him cheering these proceedings as we discuss the men's football team. And I want to also commend the comments about the women's football team and the rise it's experienced in recent years. And of course, in terms of looking forward to major events, let's not forget that Scotland is part of a joint bid for this FIFA Women's World Cup of 2035 as well. And of course, this debate follows hot on the heels of a couple of events. First and most importantly was George Adams' debate last night on football. And many members from across the chamber spoke about the value of football to Scotland. Members spoke about how it brings local communities together. And Alec Rowley, of course, also used the opportunity to talk about the value of football to our communities, about how it's part of our national culture, so important to our economy, and supports mental health and so many other good causes at the length and breadth of Scotland. There's been quite a lot of nostalgia as well from some of the members. I have to say that I was raised a 45-minute walk from Hampden Park, so I went to a lot of home matches for Scotland throughout the whole of the 1980s. So I saw some of Scotland's heroes as well, and Ken Dalglish, and obviously Gordon Strachan, Davy Cooper, Charlie Nicholas, so many others to mention. Obviously, I'm not as old as Stephen Kerr. Therefore, I did not have the opportunity to see Jim Baxter. I have seen, of course, the videos and the keepy-ups and the famous victory of Scotland over the world champions in 1967 many, many times as well. And it's also an opportunity for me to thank others. I want to thank members today for their thoughtful contributions and their constructive approach to this debate. agree more with Alec Rowley in terms of how good it is to have consensus. And when something is in the national interest and all the parties come together, it is very powerful. And so, issues like this are a good example to set. And given all the challenges facing Scotland, our country, and indeed the global challenges, perhaps it's more important than ever that we do come together when there's the opportunity for consensus to try and work in the national interest. But we've certainly done that over Euro 2028, which is a significant, really important. Yeah.
Neil Bibby.
Very much agree about the consensus around the need for consensus on such important issues of national interest. But also, I think there's I need to acknowledge actually the cooperation between the Scottish Government, other devolved administrations and the UK Government as well is equally important to benefit all of us across the UK.
Minister.
Yeah, that's an important point. This is a tournament that's taking place across these islands and Ireland as well, and therefore we all want it to be a big success and we have to work together for that purpose. So I also want to thank the opposition spokespeople for their constructive engagement and my colleagues on the committee also. And I also want to thank the Bill team and the policy team as well within the Scottish Government. I've been in government for 17 years and I just want to say that they're amongst the best I've worked with, and we should not also forget about the work that goes on behind the scenes by Scottish Government officials, not ministers, by officials. Ministers play a role, of course, to bring major events to Scotland, which we are very, very successful at doing. And a lot of that is down to the hard work and dedication and passion of Scottish Government officials who don't always get the recognition for that, who work really, really hard behind the scenes. There's a few issues I'll touch upon quickly. Neil Bibby mentioned, as did others, the importance of the tournament being accessible to people, particularly in terms of the pricing of tickets. And it's probably just worth saying that more than 40% of tickets will be in the most affordable category, and there will be no dynamic pricing as well. And of course, UEFA will provide the official resale platform as well. So, this is something that obviously we're paying close attention to also. And 80% of all tickets will be available to fans of participating teams and the general public. Patrick Harvey mentioned civil liberties, which has been a feature of taking this bill through Parliament. And I know he welcomes the safeguards, as others do, that are in the bill. We've listened carefully. And of course, some extra protection was put in at stage 2 to make sure that these protections cannot be changed by regulation. So we have also taken that seriously. Stephen Kerr mentioned the exemption for charities and from ticket touting. So there's an exception for charities and therefore registered charities. And of course, Stephen Kerr, in his opening remarks, referred to the fact that that definition should be widened. Now, of course, we have to know the definition of a charity, and that's why it's official registered charities that are subject to the exemption. But in terms of schools that have been mentioned, I think, as I said to committee, there are hundreds of schools in Scotland that have an association with charities already, and therefore, of course, we have between now and the championship for other schools to have more associations with charities if they want to take advantage of that exception as well. So I think that's a very important point to make. And just in terms of my winding up remarks, of course, the purpose of this bill is to make sure that Scotland can host Euro 2028 and unlock all these wider benefits. And we are fully committed to extending the benefits right across the country. Many members mentioned the importance of legacy, and we want to ensure that is the case. We want to leave a positive legacy for local communities, not just in Glasgow, but across the whole of the country. So we're working closely with Visit Scotland and others as well about the tourism benefits, and we are working to ensure that Euro 2028 supports our environmental ambitions, from sustainable travel, which Patrick Harvey mentioned, to circular economy principles, in line with UEFA's sustainability strategy as well. So a lot of the themes mentioned by members do chime, and of course the Government and football associations are committed to £45 million for a social impact fund to support benefits to communities across the UK and Ireland, and Scotland will have a share of that as well. So in closing, I just want to say, as we have the backdrop of Scotland qualifying for the World Cup in 2026 in the next few months, and the sense of excitement, we can also look forward to 2028 and Euro 2028 being here in Scotland. I cannot guarantee that Scotland will be there, but I have high expectations. And what I can guarantee is I will not be an MSP and I will not be a minister in 2028. So I'm really keen for Scotland to qualify, because I have a lot more time in my hands to go back to Hampden Park or other stadia, depending how they can progress through the tournament if they qualify. And therefore, it's a really exciting time for all of you in the Chamber, all fans across Scotland and the whole of the country. And I just want to thank members for their contribution and commend the bill to Parliament. Thank you.